Welcome, dear listeners, to another enchanting journey on our bedtime story channel. Tonight, we step into the serene embrace of the midnight woods, a magical forest where shadows dance and secrets whisper among the trees. Our tale follows Prince Alaric, who is drawn to the hidden depths of his palace, where ancient stories linger and forgotten doors beckon. As he uncovers the legendary garden of crystal flowers, he embarks on a quest that promises to reveal the truths of fate and destiny. So, find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and let the gentle rhythm of the story guide you into a peaceful slumber. Allow the magic of the midnight woods to wrap around you like a soft blanket, and let your imagination take flight as we begin this dreamlike adventure. Sweet dreams await. The corridors of the palace were silent, breathing only the faintest murmur of secrets held for generations. Prince Alaric moved carefully, his steps slow and measured, glancing over his shoulder now and then. He had heard the rumors since he was a child, a tale murmured by the elders, passed in fragments from those who dared remember. The tale of the garden of crystal flowers, a place lost to memory and myth, hidden away from all but the bravest, where one could glimpse the secrets of fate itself. It was by mere chance, or perhaps by something stranger, that Alaric had found himself drawn to the old wing of the palace, a wing sealed for decades and shunned by all but the dust and shadows. The air smelled of age and time here, thick with the weight of stories untold. As he wandered these silent halls, he felt himself slipping away from the present moment, as though he were walking into a dream. After hours, he reached a narrow, forgotten door, its wood dark and worn. When he pushed it open, the groan of hinges filled the silence, echoing like a warning. Inside lay a room, bare and grey, with only a single chest resting on the stone floor. Intrigued, he knelt and opened it. Dust rose in a soft cloud, and Alaric coughed, squinting through the haze to see a tattered parchment. It was a map, or what looked like one, a curious piece, fragile and yellowed with age. Strange markings twisted along its edges like vines, and the ink seemed to pulse faintly, as though it remembered the hand that had first drawn it. Alaric's fingers traced the map's paths, leading toward an unknown forest, where a shape, delicate and intricate, like the petals of a rose, was circled at the map's heart. Beside it, written in faded ink, was a single line: the garden of crystal flowers. The words hummed with a strange resonance, as if calling to him. They seemed to press into his mind, more vivid than anything he had felt in his young life. Alaric looked up, and for a moment, he imagined he saw his reflection staring back at him from the dust-clad walls. Though older, as if the very room had conjured a ghostly echo of the man he would become. His breath quickened. He had heard only fragments of tales, whispers overheard in childhood. a place of crystalline blooms, hidden beyond mortal sight, that would show to anyone brave enough to seek it the futures awaiting them. Yet every tale ended the same way, with warnings that those who entered the garden never returned the same, their hearts burdened by the weight of what they had seen. As he stared at the map, he felt his pulse quicken with the thrill of it, mingling with a strange dread. The possibility of knowing, of glimpsing what lay ahead, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Yet the allure of the garden called to him as nothing else had. "Your Highness!" The sudden voice jarred him from his thoughts, and he quickly folded the map, slipping it into his coat. A servant stood at the doorway, his gaze lowered, apologetic for interrupting. "Forgive me," Alaric said quickly, brushing dust from his clothes. I was only wondering." The servant nodded, but his eyes lingered on the forgotten room, as if seeing it for the first time. Alaric hurried past, feeling the map's weight heavy against his chest, as though it had already become a part of him. That night, as the palace slumbered under a shroud of stars, Alaric lay wide awake, his heart thrumming with anticipation and a touch of fear. The words on the map echoed in his mind, clear as the moonlight spilling through his window. The garden of crystal flowers. Tomorrow, he would go. Prince Alaric set out before the first light of dawn, a shiver of excitement mingling with trepidation as he slipped into the early morning mist. The palace lay still and quiet behind him, its towers shrouded in darkness, and he felt as though he were slipping out of one world and into another. In his hand, he clutched the map, now a worn talisman pressed close to his heart. He could barely make out the ancient, winding lines. Yet he felt an inexplicable certainty guiding his steps, an unseen force drawing him forward. The path into the forest was overgrown and wild, branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward him, roots twisting beneath his feet as if to test his resolve. Though the morning was cool, a strange warmth settled around him as he ventured deeper, the forest closing in as the sun rose beyond the thick canopy. The map, with its barely legible symbols, hinted at winding trails, hidden clearings, and cryptic landmarks, each one drawing him further into the heart of the unknown. The first sign was subtle, a rustling in the leaves, a flicker of movement just at the edge of his vision. Alaric paused, glancing around, but there was nothing to be seen. He took a deep breath and continued, his eyes sharp, his every sense alert. Soon he began to notice other oddities. A faint silver light that seemed to linger on certain leaves and stones. An eerie hum that echoed faintly from no visible source, as though the forest itself were whispering secrets too ancient to be spoken aloud. Days passed in a strange haze. Alaric felt time slipping away as he wandered deeper, lost to the strange rhythm of the forest. He walked by day and slept by night, yet sleep was fitful, out by fleeting dreams of crystal blooms and shadowed faces. Often, he awoke with the feeling that he was not alone, his heart pounding as he stared into the darkness, seeing only the endless press of trees. One evening, as the sky began to darken and twilight wove its spectral fingers through the woods, Alaric found himself before a narrow stream, its water gleaming like molten silver under the fading light. The map had marked this stream, a turning point, it seemed, for the garden was now close. He knelt, cupping his hands in the water, feeling its strange cold weight against his skin. As he drank, a chill settled over him, sharper and deeper than the cool forest air, and he felt a presence, unseen yet undeniable, watching him from beyond the trees. Rising, he saw a shape shift within the shadows, a mere flicker but unmistakable. A figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glinting like shards of glass. Alaric held his breath, waiting, but the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the faintest whisper in its wake, a sound like leaves rustling underfoot. He forced himself to move forward, a bead of sweat tracing its way down his temple. The path was nearly invisible now, cloaked in the thickening night, but he pushed forward, feeling an unseen hand guiding him, tugging him towards something vast and mysterious just beyond his reach. The moon rose high above, casting a pale glow through the branches, and Alaric's steps grew heavier, his vision blurring as fatigue washed over him. But just as he began to falter, he caught a glimmer, soft at first, barely distinguishable from the moonlight, but growing brighter with each step. He quickened his pace, the glimmer transforming into a silvery glow that pulsed gently, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. At last, he emerged into a clearing, his breath catching in his throat. Before him lay the garden of crystal flowers, radiant under the moon's silver gaze. A valley stretched out, carpeted with delicate blooms crafted from pure crystal, each petal capturing the light in 1,000 facets, shimmering in shades of sapphire, amethyst, and rose. The garden was silent, so silent that he could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, echoing through the stillness. Alaric took a cautious step forward, feeling the soft crunch of grass underfoot, yet no sound disturbed the tranquil air. The crystal flowers seemed to pulse with their own life, radiating a gentle light that danced across his face. He felt an overwhelming sense of wonder, mingled with a touch of dread, as if he stood at the edge of a dream he could never wake from. And then faintly, he heard it, the first murmur of voices, soft and distant, like echoes from another world. The flowers, he knew, held visions of the future, and as he moved closer, he could feel them calling to him, tempting him with promises of wisdom and fate, secrets and sorrows yet to come. The garden of crystal flowers lay before Alaric, its beauty almost too brilliant to behold. Each blossom shone with an otherworldly light, as though it held the captured breath of stars. Each petal a prism reflecting secret colors that changed with every glance. The flowers spread out in strange, winding paths, their glow casting a faint luminescence that illuminated the prince's face, making him look both younger and older, as if time itself was slipping across his skin. He moved forward, each step measured and slow, feeling a silent reverence settle upon him. There was a palpable weight to the air, as though the garden were charged with an energy far beyond his understanding. Alaric's heart pounded with an insistent rhythm, a mixture of wonder and trepidation, for he knew that within this place lay truth too profound to be understood by mortal hearts. As he approached the first cluster of crystal flowers, he paused, overcome by a sudden, inexplicable hesitation. A single flower, its petals a deep, inky blue, seemed to reach toward him, almost as if inviting him to touch it. He extended his hand, fingers trembling, until his skin brushed against the cool surface of the crystal. In an instant, a surge of energy shot through him, pulling him into a vision. He saw himself standing upon the throne, crowned as king, the people cheering his name. It was a scene of glory, his kingdom prosperous, his people loyal. The vision glowed with a warm golden light, filling him with a sense of triumph. But as he reached out to savor this moment, the light dimmed, and shadows crept into the edges of his mind. His kingdom began to crumble before his eyes, the people scattering in fear as fire consumed the lands, reducing the fields and forests to ashes. He saw his face again, twisted with sorrow and regret, his hands stained as though he could never wash them clean. Alaric tore his hand away, gasping, feeling as though the very breath had been stolen from his lungs. The flowers around him seemed to pulse in response, their crystalline light shifting to an ominous shade. He took a step back, but another flower, this one a vibrant red, caught his eye. Its color was like the last burst of sunset before night, an alluring glow that called to him despite his hesitation. With a steadying breath, he touched it, and once again, the world around him shifted. This vision was different, softer, more tender. He saw himself in the company of a woman whose face was bathed in shadow, her features indistinct but familiar. They stood together, her laughter echoing like the sweetest music, her hand warm in his own. He felt a deep, undeniable love within him, a love that anchored him, that made him feel more real, more human than he ever had. But as he leaned closer to see her face, the vision began to darken, and he saw himself alone, the warmth replaced by a chill that settled deep in his bones. He was standing over her grave, his heart a heavy, aching void. He stumbled back, shaken to his core, a hollowness spreading through him as the echoes of her laughter faded into silence. Alaric's gaze swept across the garden, each flower now a beacon of something he could not grasp. He knew that every blossom held a different vision, each one a possible future, a fragment of his destiny. Some were beautiful, others terrible, but all of them were intertwined. Threads of fate that could not be easily unwound. A flower caught his eye, a delicate bloom with petals clear as glass. Tentatively, he brushed its smooth surface. This vision showed him not scenes of grandeur or love, but a path of solitude. He saw himself standing upon a cliff, staring into a stormy horizon. He was alone, his eyes shadowed and weary, but a certain strength emanated from him, a strength forged by pain and wisdom. In this vision, he seemed to understand something beyond the scope of kingship or love, something more profound and elusive, as though he had become a part of the very fabric of the world. He broke from the vision with a shudder, his mind swirling with the fragments of what he had seen. The flowers seemed to whisper to him, their voices weaving together into a chorus of possibilities, tempting him to reach for yet another glimpse, to see what other truths lay buried within the crystalline blooms. But as he looked into the heart of the garden, he felt a curious stillness settle over him. He understood somehow that he could not linger here forever, that the visions, while powerful, were not the answers he sought. They were choices waiting to be made, paths he might yet walk, but they would not tell him which to choose. Each vision showed only a shadow of what could be, not what must be. He took a step back, gazing at the garden's unearthly beauty one last time. In each flower, he saw his own face reflected back at him, 1,000 futures staring through 1,000 petals. And for the first time, he felt a strange peace within himself, a sense that he held the power to shape his own fate, despite the shadows and the light that lay before him. The night deepened as Alaric stood in the garden of crystal flowers, surrounded by his countless reflections, each one caught in the glimmering facets of crystalline blooms. He could feel the weight of the visions pressing upon him, haunting echoes of futures that seemed to whisper in his mind even now. Some images were clear and brilliant, like a story fully written. Others were dark and fractured, glimpses of paths not yet taken, their meanings hidden in shadow. A heavy silence hung in the air, a silence that seemed to hold its breath along with him, waiting for him to reach out and unlock more of the garden's secrets. But as he glanced around, he sensed something had changed. The crystal flowers, once still and delicate, now seemed to sway slightly, as though a breath of invisible wind had stirred them. Their colours shifted, hues deepening and darkening, shadows swirling within the blossoms, casting strange shapes onto the ground. It was as if the garden itself was awakening, revealing secrets that lay deeper still, waiting to test his resolve. Alaric's gaze fell upon a cluster of dark violet flowers, their petals glistening with an intensity that seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. He reached out, feeling the cool, unyielding crystal beneath his fingertips. And then, without warning, a new vision flooded his mind. He saw himself in a throne room, but it was not the familiar hall of his father's palace. This one was larger, darker, its walls adorned with strange symbols, shadows pooling in the corners. The throne was carved from obsidian, gleaming cold and sharp. As he looked closer, he saw himself upon it, yet his face was hollow, his eyes distant, as though drained of life. He recognized that expression. It was one of loneliness, a profound solitude that clung to him like a shroud. In this vision, he was feared, but not loved. His advisors stood at a distance, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. He ruled with an iron hand, his will unquestioned, his commands absolute. The kingdom thrived, but it was a hollow prosperity, born of fear rather than loyalty. Alaric felt an ache in his chest, a chill that spread through him as he realized that this future would cost him more than he could bear. Power without warmth, control without connection. It was a kingdom won, yet a soul lost. The vision faded, and Alaric staggered back, his heart racing as he tried to shake off the lingering cold that clung to him. He could still feel the weight of that crown, the emptiness that had stretched endlessly around him. He drew a shaky breath, and his gaze shifted to another cluster of flowers nearby, glowing a soft golden hue. Tentatively, he touched one of the golden blooms, and a warmth enveloped him, washing over him like sunlight breaking through clouds. In this vision, he stood not as a king, but as a man surrounded by friends and loved ones, laughter ringing through the air. He saw himself with the woman from an earlier vision, her face clear now, her eyes bright with a kindness that matched his own. He was no longer bound by the chains of power, no longer isolated by a title, but living freely, his heart open and unguarded. There was simplicity here, a joy that needed no crown, no throne, only the warmth of companionship, the richness of love. But even as he savored this vision, it began to waver, flickering like a candle about to go out. Shadows crept in once more, and he saw himself older, weathered by years, his friends and family slipping from his grasp, one by one, until he was alone once more, standing at the edge of a barren field. Love, it seemed, would not shield him from loss. This path too held sorrow, though of a different kind, one born not of isolation, but of a heart broken too many times to heal. Alaric stepped back from the flowers, his mind spinning. He understood now that each vision, each potential future, was woven with both light and shadow, joy and sorrow intertwined. Every path he saw was shaped by choices that would demand sacrifices, costs he could not yet fully understand. There was no perfect future waiting for him, only a series of choices, each one leading to new wonders and new sorrows. The garden seemed to pulse around him, as if aware of his thoughts, offering him these revelations not as a certainty, but as an invitation. He realized with a start that the garden did not seek to trap him in any one fate. It was giving him the gift of awareness, the knowledge that whatever lay ahead, he would walk forward with eyes open, knowing that he alone held the power to shape his destiny. With a final glance at the flowers, Alaric turned his gaze toward the garden's far edge, where the light grew dimmer and shadows stretched longer. He felt a strange, quiet peace settling within him. The visions had shown him both the heights and depths of his soul, the darkness and light that lay within. He understood now that he would face both, as all must, and that the path he chose would be neither wholly bright nor wholly dark, but a tapestry woven from both. He turned, leaving the garden behind, his heart steady, his mind clear. As dawn approached, the first fingers of light reached across the distant horizon, casting a gentle glow upon the garden, bathing it in a strange, unearthly beauty. Alaric took one last look at the crystalline blooms, each flower a silent guardian of secrets he would carry within him forever. Though the visions had stirred a tumult of emotions, wonder, dread, yearning, he now felt a quiet certainty settling over him, like the last note of a song reverberating into silence. He had glimpsed a tapestry woven with threads of his potential selves, and he alone would decide which path to follow. He turned from the garden, taking his first steps back into the forest. Yet, even as he began his departure, a voice, soft as a whisper of leaves, echoed in his mind. It seemed to arise from the garden itself, though no human voice could have held such an ancient, sorrowful tone. The future is yours to forge, yet each choice you make shall lead you here once more. Alaric stopped, the words lingering in his thoughts, curling around his mind like mist. The garden was telling him that, no matter what path he chose, he would find himself returned here, to this crossroads of his fate. A shiver of understanding washed over him. Fate, it seemed, was not a single line, a fixed path, but a cycle, a series of choices that would return him again and again to moments of decision. The visions he had seen were merely reflections of choices waiting within him. The inevitable interplay of light and shadow that would shape his journey. He resumed his walk, leaving behind the garden's gleaming heart, its crystal flowers retreating into shadow as he ventured into the denser parts of the forest. The world outside felt dimmer somehow, as if the brilliance of the garden had muted the colors of everything else. Yet he felt an odd peace as he moved forward. The forest, once dense and strange, now seemed familiar, its paths clearer, its silence more welcoming. Each step he took seemed to dissolve the enchantment. the weight of the visions lifting, though their memory lingered, glistening like dew on a spider's web. By the time he reached the palace gates, the sun was fully risen, casting warm golden light over the familiar stone walls. He passed through the gates unnoticed, slipping quietly into his quarters, as though he had only been gone for a night. Yet he felt as though he had returned from another world entirely, as if he had aged years in the span of mere hours. Days passed, and the memories of the garden settled into his mind, not as haunting visions, but as quiet whispers, guiding his choices in subtle, invisible ways. He was gentler with those around him, aware of the fragility of the bonds he held. He took more time with his studies, understanding that knowledge could be as potent as power. And perhaps most importantly, he listened, truly listened, to the voices of his people, knowing that their trust was not his to demand, but to earn. Years flowed like rivers, each choice he made shaping his life in unseen ways. Alaric found himself faced with countless decisions, some easy, others wrenching. He chose love, though it brought him loss. He chose mercy, though it was sometimes met with betrayal. There were moments of triumph when his kingdom flourished and his people prospered, but there were also moments of despair, when the weight of the crown felt like a burden too heavy to bear. Yet through it all, he carried the memory of the garden, the understanding that each path held its light and shadow, each choice its own reward and cost. One day, long after his journey to the garden had faded into legend, Alaric found himself standing on the balcony of his castle, watching the horizon as the sun began its descent. His hair was streaked with silver, his face lined with years of wisdom and sorrow. He gazed out at his kingdom, a land he had ruled with both strength and compassion, a land that had known peace and hardship in equal measure. And as he stood there, he felt a familiar pull, a quiet calling that he hadn't heard in many years. He closed his eyes, and the memory of the garden bloomed within him, vivid as if it were yesterday. He remembered the crystal flowers, their shifting hues, the visions of futures both bright and dark. And he understood then that his journey had come full circle, that he was standing once more at a threshold, a moment of decision. The choices he had made had brought him here, but the cycle continued, spiraling endlessly forward. Taking a deep breath, he whispered to the unseen winds, "I am ready." And in that moment, he felt a peace settle within him, a profound stillness, as though the garden's heart had awakened once more within him. The prince turned back, leaving the balcony and the fading light behind. Though he walked away from the setting sun, he knew the path ahead was illuminated, each step guided by the quiet certainty he had found all those years ago in a hidden valley bathed in the crystalline glow of futures yet to be. And somewhere, far away, The garden of crystal flowers shimmered in the moonlight, waiting for another soul ready to seek its wisdom, knowing that the choices they made would lead them, as they had led Alaric, back to the heart of the garden where fate and choice entwined forever.